By sundown, the ranch hands swore they'd never seen anything like it. An orphaned black girl, no taller than a fence post, and carrying water in a dented tin bucket, had stumbled onto their land that morning. She wasn't looking for trouble, just a day's worth of work to earn her supper. But when the prairie winds rose, the herd spooked, and a wall of fire raced across the grasslands. It wasn't the seasoned cowboys or the foreman who turned the tide. It was her. By evening she stood in the yard, smoke clinging to her braids, eyes sharp as flint, and every man there knew one truth: she had carried more than water. She had carried them. And what happened that night made her a legend they'd speak of for years, though not all would agree on how the story truly ended. The morning sun burned down on the Kansas prairie like it meant to test anyone walking it. Heat shimmered over the grass, rippling the horizon into a wavering mirage. Out there, a girl walked barefoot, each step raising dust that clung to her calves. She carried nothing but a patched dress, a bucket, and a stare that said she'd already seen more of life's cruelty than most grown men. Her name, though no one at the ranch knew it yet, was Lila. Folks in the nearest town called her the orphan black girl from the river tents, though they rarely said it with kindness. She'd been alone for near 2 years, since fever took her mama and wagon wheels rolled over her daddy on the trail west. She survived by odd jobs, scrubbing pans, gathering kindling, sometimes carrying water for travelers too proud to bend their own backs. Now at 12, maybe 13, she walked toward Maddox Ranch with her bucket. Some might call that foolish. Out on the prairie, wandering into a stranger's spread without name or sponsor could mean a whipping, or worse. But hunger presses a body past fear, and Lila hadn't eaten since yesterday's handful of wild berries. From a rise she saw it, a scatter of low buildings, a barn with a sagging roofline, and beyond that, an ocean of cattle penned against the horizon. A ranch like that meant men, and men meant work. She tightened her grip on the bucket. The ranch yard was busy when she stepped in. Dust rose in clouds around stomping hooves. Cowboys cursed as they drove a restless herd toward water. A big man with a whipcord beard barked orders from the corral gate. He was the foreman, though she didn't know his name yet. Heads turned when they spotted her. A stranger, a girl, a black orphan in the middle of a white man's ranch. The yard grew quiet enough she could hear the creak of the windmill. The bearded man walked up slow, his boots crunching gravel. He had the shoulders of an ox, and eyes that didn't blink much. "You lost, girl?" he asked. "No, sir," her voice flat, steady. "Looking for work." He let out a low chuckle, but it wasn't kind. "Work? What can you do?" She raised the bucket. "Carry water." Some of the hands laughed, others spat in the dirt. But the foreman studied her a beat longer. Something in her stance, the way she didn't flinch, didn't look down, made him pause. Finally he shrugged. "Fine. You want to haul water, haul it. Don't get in the way, and don't expect pay more than a scrap." She nodded once, like she'd won more than he thought. The ranch hands put her to it straight away. The well sat a good 100 yards from the corral, and the sun showed no mercy. She filled that dented bucket till her arms shook, then carried it back. Again and again, like an ant dragging more than its size. The men watched at first, waiting for her to quit, but she didn't. By noon sweat soaked her dress. By mid-afternoon her shoulders burned raw from the hand. Still, she carried. Still, she walked. One cowboy muttered, "Girl's tougher than she looks." The foreman didn't answer, but he noticed too. It was late afternoon when the prairie changed. A hot gust swept through, scattering dust like smoke. Horses snorted and stamped, uneasy. In the distance, thunder rumbled, except it wasn't thunder. The ground trembled with a low roar that grew louder every second. The herd smelled it before the men did. Fire, somewhere west. Dry grass had caught, and now the wind drove a wall of flame across the plain. The foreman's face blanched. "Stampede," he barked. Cattle bawled and surged. Men shouted, scrambling for ropes and saddles. In seconds, order dissolved into chaos, and in the middle of it, forgotten, barefoot, clutching her bucket, stood Lila. Now listener, picture it. Thousands of pounds of muscle and horns crashing toward wooden fences, hooves pounding like war drums, men running, dust choking their lungs, fire painting the horizon orange, and one girl, no kin, no claim, caught in the storm. Here's where it could have ended. Plenty of stories on the prairie do, nameless bones trampled under hooves, forgotten by nightfall. But this story, no, because that girl didn't drop her bucket, didn't run screaming. She turned, eyes sharp as if she'd seen fire before. And what she did next, well, that's what turned whispers into legend. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we reach the moment she became their hero, you need to know what kind of girl she was, and what kind of ranch she walked into. You need to know the secrets men kept, the grudges that already burned hotter than the fire rolling across the plains. Because nothing on that land was simple, and by nightfall it wasn't just cattle or grass at stake. It was lives, loyalty, and the truth of who deserved to belong. By the time the first flames licked the fence line, choices had to be made fast, and not all of them would be noble. The foreman thought he knew how the story would play out. The ranch hands thought they did too, but they hadn't reckoned on Lila, a barefoot orphan with nothing to lose, and more courage in her thin arms than any of them guessed. The first sound wasn't flame, it was thunder, deep, rolling, wrong. The kind that makes a man's gut tighten before his mind catches up. Every cowboy in the yard froze for half a breath. Then the truth hit, cattle on the run. The herd had smelled the fire before the men had. A black line of smoke trailed across the western horizon, carried fast by a merciless wind. Grass crackled and lit like tinder, and the fire front moved as if the devil himself was pushing it. Stampede, the foreman roared, though by then it was plain. The ground shook. Cattle bawled, ramming against the fencing. Dust rose in choking clouds as hooves pounded like war drums. Men scrambled for ropes and horses. Orders flew. Shut the north gate. Get the colts inside. Drive 'em east, east. But the herd didn't hear human voices anymore. They heard only terror. In the chaos, one figure seemed out of place. The barefoot girl with the dented bucket. She stood near the well, thin arms, trembling. Eyes fixed on the horizon. Every instinct in a person says to run when fire bears down. She didn't. She watched. The foreman, Burke, they called him, cursed as he hauled a saddle onto his gelding. He was a hard man, not known for softness or hesitation. But he had a moment's pause when his gaze locked on the girl. "She'll be trampled," one hand shouted. Burke barked back, "Then get her out," but no one moved. Every cowboy was already fighting for his own survival, his own horse, his own chance to keep from being crushed under half a ton of stampeding beef. Burke spat in the dirt, swung into the saddle, and wheeled his gelding toward the corral. The girl was forgotten, or so he thought. Lila gripped that bucket till her knuckles whitened. She could have dropped it, could have run, but running had never saved her before. Running hadn't stopped fever from taking her mama. Hadn't stopped a wagon wheel from snapping her daddy's rib. Running only left you with empty hands. So she didn't run. She filled the bucket. She lowered the rope, pulled up water clear and cold, then hefted the weight against her chest. The world shook around her, but she fixed her eyes on the barn where the ranch dogs howled, chained and forgotten in the rush. She could hear their panic over the roar. Step by step she carried the bucket across the trembling ground. Now, picture it. The prairie horizon ablaze, a curtain of orange whipping higher than the cottonwoods. Smoke rolled low, thick as tar, stinging eyes and choking throats. Sparks flew ahead of the flame, carried like arrows by the wind. Fences groaned as cattle smashed against them. The herd broke, boards splintered, horns clashed. 1,000 bodies surged eastward in a living tide. Cowboys shouted themselves hoarse, chasing, roping, whipping. But the herd didn't care. Survival had no language but speed. Through it all the girl wove like a shadow, thin frame slipping between gaps, bare feet silent on the dust. The dogs barked mad, yanking chains, and still she carried, still she moved. One of the cowboys, a young hand named Cutter, spotted her through the smoke. "Hey, kid, get billed," swinging his lasso to drive her away from the stampede's path. But she didn't flinch. Didn't even look at him. She dumped her bucket over the dog's trough, soaked their chains and pulled with every ounce of her wiry strength, until the bolt gave. The animals tore free, bolting from the barn just as a sheet of sparks rained down on the roof. The barn caught, Flame climbed fast, and Lila stood there, empty bucket in hand, staring up at the inferno. This should have been the end. A girl too stubborn for her own good, caught in fire she couldn't fight. Cutter shouted again, ready to spur his horse toward her, but just then a steer crashed into the fence between them, splintering wood and blocking his path. Dust, smoke, sparks. The yard became a battlefield. Men coughing, horses screaming, fire hissing closer, and somewhere in that hell, a barefoot girl picked up her bucket and turned back to the well. Listener, ask yourself, why? Why go again? Because what none of those men knew was that Lila had seen fire before. Back in the river tents, flames had taken more than wood and canvas. She knew its hunger, knew it spread fastest when it found dry roofs and penned animals. And she knew, in that instant, the barn wasn't the only danger. The main house, with its porch stacked high in dry lumber, was. Burke and the older hands fought to steer the herd away from the fire line, risking hooves and horns with every pass. Younger cowboys clung to fences, coughing through smoke. Some cursed the fire, some cursed their luck, a few cursed the girl. What's she think she's doing? One yelled, she'll get us all killed. Another spat, but not one of them left their post to drag her away. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was shame. Maybe deep down they wanted to see if she'd actually manage what none of them dared. Back at the well, she hauled a rope, biting her palms, water sloshing, arms shaking. She staggered under the weight but didn't stop. Sparks burned holes in her dress. Smoke seared her throat. Still she walked. When she reached the porch, she splashed water across the boards, soaking the steps, the posts, the threshold. Then back she went. Another bucket. Another soaking. She moved like a machine wound too tight to break. Cowboys watching between coughs and curses started muttering low, not laughter this time, something closer to awe. The fire roared into the yard proper, embers raining down. The barn collapsed with a crash, sparks exploding skyward. Men flinched, horses bolted, but the house by some miracle didn't catch. The wet wood hissed, smoked, but held. And in front of it stood Lila, smoke-streaked, hair plastered to her face, bucket in hand. Not a hero in the way dime novels tell it. No shining armor, no blazing gun, just a girl who refused to let go of the only weapon she had, water. By the time Burke wheeled his horse back into the yard, blackened and coughing, he saw what she'd done. And in that moment, something shifted. In him, in the men, in the whole damn ranch. But here's the catch. Saving the house wasn't the end of her trial. It was only the beginning, because men don't give away respect easy, not to each other, and sure as hell not to a barefoot orphan girl. By nightfall the fire outside would be nothing compared to the fire of suspicion, pride and secrets smoldering inside those walls. The prairie fire died before midnight. Wind shifted, clouds rolled in, and the flames chewed themselves to ash in a circle of blackened grass. By then the herd had been driven east. The barn stood as a heap of cinders, and the ranch yard was a wreck of smoke, hoofprints and exhaustion. But inside the house, the one standing dry because of her buckets, the true fire smoldered. Lila sat on the floor near the hearth, clutching her empty bucket like it was a shield. Her dress was singed at the hem, her skin streaked with soot, her eyes red from smoke. Around her stood half a dozen cowboys and their foreman Burke, each man gaunt with fatigue, but not softened by it. The air wasn't grateful. It was thick with something sharper, suspicion. Burke leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying her like she was a riddle. You could have run, he said, voice low. Every fool in this yard thought you'd run. Why didn't you? Lila stared at the bucket. Running don't stop fire. One of the hands, Cutter, the youngest, gave a short laugh, half in disbelief. She's right, boss. How's be gone if not for her? That earned him a glare from another cowboy, older, bitter. They called him McGraw, a man who measured respect by skin and surname. Or maybe she set it, he spat. Shows up with nothing but a bucket, and half an hour later the whole damn prairie's burning. Convenient if you ask me. The room went silent. Only the crackle of embers outside filled the space. Burke's jaw tightened. He didn't dismiss McGraw outright. Out here suspicion could save your life, or take someone else's. He studied Lila again, and for a moment she wondered if he'd throw her back into the ash. But she didn't flinch. She raised her chin, meeting his gaze head-on. "I didn't light your fire," she said. "I carried water. That's—" Burke didn't answer. Instead, he pushed off the wall and stalked to the window. Outside, the herd moaned restless, penned but unsettled. The men shifted in the silence, muttering low. Gratitude warred with prejudice, and the latter had sharper teeth. At length Burke spoke. "House is standing because of her. That's fact. Barn's gone. Herd's half wild. But we'll mend. First light we rebuild." McGraw growled. "And the girl?" Burke turned, eyes cold. "She stays. Earned it more than some of you." That settled nothing. It only lit another fuse. Later, when the men bedded down in the bunkhouse, Lila remained by the hearth. Sleep was a stranger. Her arms still shook from hauling water. Smoke clung to her lungs. And though the fire outside had died, she felt surrounded by another. One she couldn't douse with a bucket because she'd seen their eyes. Gratitude burned quick and bright, but suspicion smoldered longer. She was a stranger, a black orphan, and worst of all, she had proven herself in front of men who didn't want proving done by the likes of her. That was the danger. Sometime before dawn, voices drifted from the porch. The thin walls didn't hide much. "She's trouble," McGraw hissed. "You saw what she did," Cutter whispered back. "I saw a girl who don't know her place," McGraw snapped. "Burke's soft if he thinks keeping her won't rot us from inside. Mark me, she'll cost us more than that barn." Silence. Then footsteps. Lila hugged her knees tighter. "Now, if you've ever lived where trust is thinner than fence wire, you know a deed don't buy belonging. Out there you had to earn it again every sunrise, and even then a man could take it from you with a word, a lie, a sideways glance." That's where Lila stood, hero by night, suspect by dawn, and the prairie wasn't done testing her. Morning broke red, painting the sky with fire's echo. Men moved slow, stiff from smoke and lost sleep. They walked the yard like soldiers after a battle, quiet, hollow-eyed, waiting for orders. Burke gave them, "We cut new fence, drive herd east, till ground cools. McGraw, you're with me. Cutter, get the yearlings. The rest, mend what you can." Then his gaze fell on Lila. "You, stay near the house, haul water, keep the well fresh." McGraw spat in the dust. Cutter smirked, half relief, half apology. The others just nodded, too tired to argue. But Lila caught the warning in Burke's tone. "Stay where I can see you. Stay where trouble can't be pinned worse on you." By midday, Cutter drifted back to the well, sweat streaking his soot-stained face. He watched her pull another bucket, then shook his head with a crooked grin. "Don't listen to McGraw," he said. "Old man don't like anyone who ain't him. You did good." She didn't answer, just kept hauling. "You always this stubborn," he pressed. She glanced at him, eyes sharp. "You always talk this much." That made him laugh, short, surprised. "Guess I deserve that." For the first time her lips twitched almost into a smile, almost. But even as they traded words, McGraw's shadow stretched long across the yard. He watched, and his eyes promised the girl's trial was far from over. That evening, when the herd was finally penned and the men dragged themselves back, the sky was heavy with storm clouds. Lightning cracked distant over the plains. The smell of rain teased the air. Burke gathered the crew in the yard. "Storm's coming. Last thing we need is more fire. Double the watch. Nobody sleeps through thunder." Men groaned but obeyed, and as they scattered, Lila saw it plain. Fire outside, storm above, suspicion within. Trouble brewed on all fronts. The men thought the worst was behind them. They'd beaten fire, saved the herd, kept their house. But storms don't care what a man thinks he's a. And before the next dawn, thunder would split the sky, lightning would strike, and every hidden grudge in that ranch yard would come clawing into the open. And once again, it would be the orphan girl barefoot, smoke-streaked, bucket in hand, standing where none expected her. First came the wind, long moaning gusts that rattled shutters and bent the cottonwoods until their branches scraped the roof. Then the lightning cracked, splitting the sky white for an instant before plunging everything back into black. Finally came the thunder, rolling heavy as cannon fire across the plains. The men stirred restlessly in the bunkhouse, boots half on, rifles near at hand. Out here, storms didn't just mean rain. They meant lightning struck grass, another fire, cattle breaking fence lines in panic, and sometimes, storms brought worse, old grudges sharpened by dark. Burke stood in the yard, rain spattering his hat brim, voice steady as stone. Cutter, your east fence. McGraw, north line. Keep the herd calm. Others with me. He glanced toward the porch where Lila stood clutching her bucket. The storm light made her look smaller than ever, a thin shadow against the boards. You stay put, girl, he ordered. Don't step off that porch. She nodded once, though her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon where lightning forked down, closer each strike. Hours dragged. Rain turned the yard to mud. Men shouted over the roar, driving cattle back from breaking fences. Each flash of lightning showed horns tossing, eyes wide with panic. The storm was loud, endless, merciless, but the real danger wasn't just outside the fence, because McGraw hadn't stopped watching her. Near the north line, Cutter caught up to him. Why you keep jawing about the girl, he asked, rope in one hand, rain soaking his shirt. McGraw's lip curled. 'Cause she don't belong. You blind boy. She comes, fire follows. Barns ash, herd spooked. Now storm rolls in like judgment. Tell me that ain't curse. That's horse done and you know it, Cutter shot back. McGraw leaned close, voice low and mean. Mark me, son, that girl's a spark waiting to catch. Burke soft, but I ain't. Tonight we put her out before she burns us worse. Cutter froze. You talkin' murder. McGraw's smile was colder than the rain. I'm talking survival. Now listener, let me stop here a breath. You might think this is just McGraw's poison talk. Words spat in storm's shadow. But out on the frontier, men killed for less. Skin, suspicion, pride. Any excuse could be enough. And when thunder drowns screams and lightning blinds eyes, well, a man could vanish without witness. So picture the stakes. One barefoot girl on a porch, a bucket her only shield, and a storm that makes killing easy. Near dawn, when the rain slackened, McGraw left his post. He trudged through the mud toward the porch, rifle slung, eyes glinting in the stormlight. Lila saw him coming. Her gut tightened, but she didn't step back. She'd been run off too many times before to show her back now. He stopped at the bottom step, sneer cutting his face. You proud of yourself, girl? Barn's gone, herd near lost, and Burke's letting you sit high and dry while we bleed in the mud. I carried water, she said, voice even. House still stands. That house? He jerked his chin. That's ours, ain't yours. Never will. Lightning split the sky behind him, painting him stark and terrible. McGraw stepped onto the porch, boots heavy. He loomed over her, close enough. She smelled the whiskey on his breath. You know what happens to strays out here? He growled. They get put down, quick. Her hand tightened on the bucket handle. For a heartbeat she thought of swinging it at his skull. But striking him meant death, certain. So instead she did the one thing he didn't expect. She lifted the bucket between them steady, like it weighed nothing. Then you'll have to kill me carrying, she whispered. For a moment, thunder swallowed the world. Back off, McGraw. The voice came sharp, young from the shadows. Cutter stepped into the porch light, rope still looped in one hand, pistol in the other. Rain dripped from his hat brim. His face set hard. She saved this place, he said. You raise a hand to her, you answer to me. McGraw's eyes narrowed. You'd draw steel on your own kin for a stray. Cutter didn't blink. I'd draw for... The two men stared, storm cracking overhead. For a breath it seemed blood would spill right there on the porch. But McGraw spat, a wad dark against the mud. Ain't worth hanging for. He shouldered past Cutter and stalked back into the storm. Lila's knees trembled once he was gone. But she didn't let herself fall. Not till Cutter turned to her, holstering his pistol. You all right? He asked. She nodded, though her hands shook on the bucket. You keep carrying like that, he muttered. Might outlast us all. Morning finally cracked the horizon, pale light spilling over sodden ground. The worst of the storm had passed, but fences lay broken, cattle scattered, men worn thin. The yard looked less like victory, and more like survival bought on credit. Burke rode in from the far line, coat torn, face black with mud. He saw Cutter and the girl on the porch, saw the rifle slung carelessly across McGraw's back, and pieced enough together to keep his jaw tight and his words few. "We mend fence," he said. "We count herd. And tonight we talk." That last part carried weight. Tonight, reckonings would come. By evening, the fire would be out. The storm passed, the herd corralled. But peace wouldn't last. Because storms don't just tear down fences, they tear open. And before the sun set again, the question wouldn't be whether the ranch could survive prairie fire or thunder. It'd be whether it could survive itself. And once more, at the center of it, stood the orphan girl with her dented bucket, the one weapon nobody else knew how to wield. The prairie never stays quiet long. Fires burn out, storms pass, cattle settle, but men carry storms inside them. The day after the fire and the stampede, Maddox Ranch looked held together by wire and stubbornness. Smoke still smudged the sky where the barn had stood. Half the herd chewed nervously in the east pasture, penned with makeshift rails. The house stood dry, its porch still stained dark with the water. Lila had flung across it, but inside the bunkhouse, and in the yard, another blaze smoldered, not of grass or timber, of men's pride. Burke called the crew to the yard that evening. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. When a foreman speaks low after trouble, men listen sharper. "We survived fire," he said, arms folded, boots planted in wet earth. "We survived storm, but a ranch breaks from inside before outside, and last night I saw enough to know we're close." Eyes flicked toward Lila, some hard, some soft, most unreadable. She stood on the porch step, bucket by her side, shoulders square though she could feel every glance like a burr under her skin. Burke went on. "McGraw says the girl don't belong, says she brought fire with her. I say the house stands because she hauled more than any man here. I say she's earned her place." Murmurs rolled through the men, half agreement, half doubt. Cutter spoke clear. "She saved us. That's fact." McGraw spat into the dirt. "She cursed us, and you're too blind to see it." That was the match. In seconds, voices rose, some with Cutter, some with McGraw. Men who'd sweated shoulder to shoulder that very morning now squared off like strangers at a gambling table. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside broke loose. "You blaming a child for lightning. She ain't a child, she's trouble. She worked harder than you, McGraw. You calling me lazy boy?" Burke barked. "Enough." But the words didn't Lila clutched her bucket tighter. She had no words to throw into the circle, and if she did, they'd only clang hollow against men's anger. Out here, proof wasn't spoken. It was carried. When the shouting broke into shoving, McGraw stepped back. His eyes glittered. This wasn't chaos to him. It was cover. He slipped toward the alley gate, where a lantern burned low. Lila saw him, saw the flask at his belt, saw the glint of oil as he tipped it. Her stomach dropped. "He's going to light it. Blame me. Break them all." Without thinking, she ran. She shouted, but the wind and voices swallowed her cry. He struck flint. The spark caught. Flame leapt in the lantern glass. He swung it wide toward a pile of dry hay left from the barn. Lila didn't stop. She hurled her bucket. The arc of water hissed over the lantern, dousing fire before it found air. The glass shattered at McGraw's feet. Steam and smoke burst up. Every head turned. Silence dropped heavy as stone. McGraw snarled, hand going for the pistol at his hip. Cutter lunged, grabbing his arm. The pistol went off, bullet whining wild into the dusk. Cattle bawled, men scattered for cover. Burke shoved through, roaring, "Drop it!" But the two were already locked, boots slipping in the mud. Cutter's fist cracked across McGraw's jaw. McGraw slammed an elbow into his rib. Lila grabbed the bucket again. She swung hard, tin ringing against McGraw's wrist. The pistol flew into the dirt. Cutter kicked it away. But McGraw was big and mean, built from years of swinging fence posts and fists. He slammed Cutter back, drove him against the porch rail. Cutter gasped, eyes wide. "Enough." Burke's voice thundered. He strode in, grabbed McGraw by the collar, and wrenched him off. The men closed in, forming a ring. No one laughed. No one muttered. They'd seen it clear. McGraw trying to burn them out. McGraw reaching for murder when called. Burke held him steady, face set like iron. "You're finished." McGraw spat blood. "You fire me, I'll spread word from here to Abilene that you let a stray run your ranch, that you let a girl shame you all." Burke's voice dropped to a knife's edge. "Tell it. Tell every saloon how a barefoot orphan saved your hide. See how men laugh when they hear a bucket beat you, that cut deeper than fists." McGraw sagged. His eyes darted, looking for one ally among the circle. He found none. "Pack your kit," Burke said. "You ride out at dawn. The ranch should have slept easy. Trouble named, trouble gone." But McGraw's shadow lingered. Men rolled in their bunks uneasy. Cattle shifted restless in the pens. And Lila, up in the loft above the kitchen, couldn't close her eyes. Because she knew men like McGraw didn't leave clean. They came back, and she was right. Near midnight, a horse's hooves drummed low across the yard. A figure slipped from the cottonwoods, pistol drawn. McGraw. He'd packed nothing. He hadn't ridden for town. He'd waited for dark and rage to cover him. Burke stood from his cot at the first sound. Cutter. Lila felt it before either of them. That prickle on the neck. That sense of storm not over. She slipped down the ladder, bare feet silent, bucket in hand. The shot cracked. Porch boards splintered where Burke had stood a second before. Men shouted, stumbling for rifles. Cattle bawled. McGraw rode straight at the porch, pistol flashing. Lila ran at him. The bucket caught the next bullet. Tin shrieked as lead punched through near the rim. The handle snapped against her palm, tearing skin. But she didn't drop it. She swung. The bucket rang against McGraw's wrist, and the pistol spun into the mud. McGraw roared, leapt off the horse, tackled her down. She hit the ground hard, breath gone. His hands clamped around her throat. Then Cutter was there, driving him sideways. They rolled in the mud, fists wild, boots kicking. The men piled in, dragging McGraw back, binding him with fence wire. Burke stood over him, chest heaving, hat gone, eyes colder than midnight. "Sheriff'll have you in irons come morning." At first light, Burke and two hands rode McGraw into town, wrists bound, curses fading with distance. The yard breathed easier, though the bruise of the night still throbbed. The men rebuilt fence, checked herd, cleaned rifles. Lila hauled water, patched buckets, scrubbed mud from the porch. No one mocked her now. A few even nodded thanks, awkward and quiet, but true. That evening, Burke called her to the table. He set down a plate, slid it toward her. "You've carried enough," he said. "Now sit." It was more than food. It was a place. Weeks passed. The barn rose again, boards hammered, beams lifted. The herd steadied, fattening on autumn grass. The storm season waned. Lila stayed. She carried water still, but not just as a stranger. She carried it as part of the ranch. Cutter joked more. Some men softened, some stayed hard, but none dared call her stray again. One night, as coyotes howled distant, Burke said to her, "You've earned more than scraps. You've earned a roof." He nodded toward the loft. "That's yours as long as you'll have it." Lila touched the bucket's dented rim, the bullet hole near the top, the handle bound in cloth torn from her own dress. "I'll keep carrying," she said. Burke tipped his hat. "Then this place'll keep standing." Now, if you'd been there, if you'd seen the house still standing, the herd alive, the men humbled, you'd know this truth. Heroes don't always ride in with six-shooters or silver spurs. Sometimes they walk in barefoot, carrying nothing but a bucket and a will stronger than fire or storm. And that orphan black girl, the one who carried water when every man thought it useless, by evening she became more than their savior. She became the measure they'd carry forward, proof that grit don't ask your age, your name, or the color of your skin. Grit just asks if you'll keep carrying when the world says drop it. And Lila, she never dropped it.